Of the $93 billion that Africa needs to spend on infrastructure development every year, $43 billion comes from governments and international agencies, and that's according to the Africa Development Bank. As CNBC Africa's Christine Wendo reports, bridging a gap of $50 billion calls for more efficient public-private partnership agreements. Take a look.
Africa's attractiveness is undeterred by the global growth slowdown, with infrastructure-related foreign direct investment soaring to $71 billion in 2015. But with improved efficiency in public-private partnership models, even more foreign capital could end up in the sector.
Africa has a large demand for infrastructure, whether it's highways or roads or water, access to water. There's a big demand to serve both the growing economic activity around Africa and also growing populations. On the other hand, there's a lot of what we call international money or capital waiting to invest in Africa. So when you bring the two together, the best way is to start by creating PPP, what we call public-private partnership frameworks. The reason being that they are attractive to the private sector because they help to bring the government and the private sector together to share what we call risk in the project. Therefore, they go into the project together.
Among the options of what experts consider efficient PPP is the Build, Operate, Transfer model adopted by the Kenyan government in the construction of the Lamu Port Southern Sudan-Ethiopia Transport Corridor, LAPSSET. The project, which is valued at over $29 million, is expected to grow Kenya's economy by 3% per annum by 2020.
The section where we are doing joint partnerships between the government and the private sector, planning and design of the crude oil pipeline, development of the other berths following the first three berths, and planning for the economic corridor. And then finally now, once these are all in place and the corridor is operational, then we can go into now fully private sector investments, such as the remaining berths of the Lamu Port, the international airports, the resort cities, and so on.
Another model is the Design, Build, Finance and Operate model. This framework is in effect in the construction of Konza City, Kenya's proposed Silicon Savannah.
We decided, instead of being given a little money every year and building a kilometer or two of roads every year, we negotiate and have one contractor do the roads for phase one, including electricity distribution, conduits, water treatment plants, everything the city needs to start off at one go, and then negotiate payments with Treasury over a period of time.
Various of the PPP models will enable you to do that without actually increasing your public debt. First of all, it's the private sector which is putting in the finance. And you can actually have a model called a revenue bond, where the bond, the finance, is paid off from the revenue of the project. So you could do this with electricity, for example, or from roads which are tolled. You can't do it from schools or from hospitals where there is no revenue flow. So those are completely off the balance sheet of the government.
The PPP Act of 2013 was implemented in a bid to increase private sector investment and to generate a pipeline of bankable projects. With 71 proposed projects as at 2015, more still needs to be done to create an enabling environment, especially in the areas of corruption.
The way you deal with it is simply having transparent procurement systems, competitive procurement systems. I think that is where, then you are able to deal with the issue, because you level the playing field and everybody is able to play on an equal footing. So I think a lot of countries, there's political will, there are measures being taken to make this happen. And frankly, my view is, notwithstanding these concerns, there is still a lot of private sector interest in investing, particularly in infrastructure, not just in Kenya, but in the rest of Africa.
One of the things which needs to be done is look at the tax regime to make sure that the tax regime is sympathetic. We need to actually ensure that the employment laws are such that they can actually bring in foreign workers to actually develop the project, but then obviously to employ locals as much as possible. They need to be able to repatriate profits. I mean, these people aren't in it for the public welfare. They're in it to make money. What the public interest is in getting a service, getting a product, getting something actually working. But their interest is money, and so you actually have to work with them to use that profit motive to deliver a public service for the public good.
Going forward, experts recommend innovative financial models such as syndicated banking and diaspora infrastructure bonds to bridge the funding gap.
You have a huge diaspora, a lot of Kenyans who live abroad, who actually feel very interested in the mother country and sending money home. In fact, you know, the amount of money that's sent as remittances back to Africa, to Kenya, is actually greater than the amount of money which comes in from international investment agencies. So one of the opportunities is obviously to tap into that by creating diaspora bonds, bonds that are actually invested by people of Kenyan origin who are actually living abroad.
The other is also to identify those opportunities that the private sector can do on their own. For example, being an independent power producer. You set up a plant to generate power and you supply the main grid. The third also is we need to increasingly look at what we call local capital markets. If you look at the pension funds, the insurance funds in Kenya and the rest of Africa, there are many of them and they are holding on to a lot of money. So we need to see how we can unlock that money to support infrastructure development.